Hi, welcome to Feed Your Soul. I am Melinda, and you are watching our series on the Torah portions. This is where we go through the first 5 books of the Bible to better understand the foundations of our faith, so followers of Jesus can know what the teachings of Jesus are based upon, so that we can know the front of our Bibles better than we do. And we are in the week entitled Vayashlach, and that is just the Hebrew for the first significant words in the portion, and it's "and he sent." So this is taken from Genesis 32, the beginning, like verse 3, depending if you're looking at the Hebrew text or uh, English versions. That verse might change a little bit there in this portion, but in the version I'm reading from, it's 32, verse 3 through 36. And then we'll be looking at Malachi chapter 2, and then Hebrews chapter 2. All throughout, we're going to look at different texts from Jubilees, the book of Jubilees, and to see some backstory we can be given from this extra biblical book, where it tells us a lot and gives us a lot of insight on this specific section. So there's a lot to cover today. So I'm going to try not to make it go much more than an hour. So let's get into it. Starting here in Genesis 32. And Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau his brother in the land of Seir, the country of Edom, instructing them, "Thus you shall say to my lord Esau, thus says your servant Jacob, I have sojourned with Laban and stayed until now. I have donkeys, flocks, male servants, and female servants. I have sent to tell my lord in order that I may find favor in your sight." And the messengers returned to Jacob, saying, "We came to your brother Esau, and he is coming to meet you, and there are 400 men with him." And Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed. He divided the people who were with him, and the flocks and herds and camels, into 2 camps, thinking, if Esau comes to one camp and attacks it, then the camp that is left will escape. So we're picking up after Jacob is on his way back from working with Laban, his uncle, and acquiring 2 wives. But he had left his homeland because Esau was going to kill him. And it doesn't really explicitly say that, I don't believe, in Genesis, but it definitely says that outright in Jubilees, that he had to leave because Esau was ready to do harm, kill his brother for taking his birthright, and also getting the blessing from Abraham, and also from Isaac. So Jacob's coming back and he doesn't know what to expect, but he knows that God called him back. This is why they're on the trip. This is why they left Laban's home. God said, it's time for you to go home. So let's keep going. Verse 9. And Jacob said, "O God of my father Abraham, and God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who said to me, return to your country and to your kindred, that I may do you good. I am not worthy of the least of all the deeds of steadfast love and all the faithfulness that you have shown your servant. For with only my staff I crossed this Jordan, and now I have become 2 camps. Please deliver me from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, that he may come attack me, the mothers with the children. But you said, I will surely do you good and make your offspring as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude." So Jacob leaves it in God's hands, right? He said, you promised, I'm trusting you. But he's afraid, right? So he's praying, but there's also action. He has a strategy. So he stayed there that night. And from what he had with him, he took a present for his brother Esau, 200 female goats and 20 male goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 milking camels and their calves, 40 cows and 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys and 10 male donkeys. These he handed over to his servants, every drove by itself, and said to his servants, pass on ahead of me and put space between drove and drove. He instructed the first, when Esau, my brother, meets you and asks, to whom do you belong? Where are you going? And whose are these ahead of you? Then you shall say, they belong to your servant Jacob. They are present sent to my lord Esau, and moreover, he is behind us. He likewise instructed the second and third and all who followed the droves. You shall say the same thing to Esau when you find him. And you shall say, moreover, your servant Jacob is behind us. For he thought, I may appease him, literally his face, with a present that goes ahead of me. And afterward I shall see his face. Perhaps he will accept me, literally my face. So the present passed on ahead of him, and he himself stayed that night in the camp. So pointing out some language that's beginning to emerge in this portion, the face, panim in Hebrew, it's all throughout this section, and we'll see how it becomes a little bit more significant as we keep reading in 32. The same night he arose and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok River. And he took them and sent them across the stream and everything else that he had, and Jacob was left alone. And a man wrestled with him until the breaking of day. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he touched his hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint, and he wrestled with him. Then he said, let me go, for the day has broken. But Jacob said, I will not let you go until you bless me. And he said to him, what is your name? And he said, Jacob. Then he said, your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed. Then Jacob asked him, please tell me your name. But he said, why is it that you ask my name? And there he blessed him. So Jacob called the name of this place Peniel, saying, for I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been delivered. The sun rose up upon him as he passed Penuel, limping because of his hip. Therefore, to this day, the people of Israel do not eat the sinew of the thigh that is on the hip socket, because he touched the socket of Jacob's hip on the sinew of the thigh. So there's a lot there, right? This wrestling with this entity that the text says is a man, but then Jacob clearly identifies this entity as divine. So depending on your tradition, where you come from, how you were raised in church, or if you're brand new to the text, right, you would probably read this a little bit differently, depending on your background. And depending on your translation, you're going to have verse 30 is going to capitalize the word G there in God, for I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been delivered. The word there is Elohim. And a lot of theology gets thrown around there as to like who this entity is. You might have heard that this is like a pre-incarnate visiting of Jesus, actually, Yeshua. But sometimes we like to make it a little bit more complicated than it is. And I think it makes us read past a theme throughout Scripture where angels, messengers, there's this whole kind of beings that, depending on what text you read, there are like billions of angels that God created according to, I want to say, Jubilees on day 2 of creation. So there are these entities that God created to be ministers. They minister in heaven, and they're ministering on the behalf of humans. They were sent to earth to help humans. We had that whole story about how that went wrongly with the time of Noah. But when we want to look at every time an entity appears to interact with humans, that we want to read a little bit more into it sometimes than there is. This is the word Elohim, and Elohim does not necessarily mean the Most High God. It doesn't. It oftentimes will refer to angels, and angels, or even gods in lowercase g, right? So idols. A few times people are referred to as Elohim. It is a word for God, ruler, right? We went over this in one of our our helpful Hebrew videos. So to remember, because we see the word God, where our translations often give them a capital G, where we use that capital God to honor the Most High God, right, the Creator, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what that word means in that text in context. So oftentimes, the word Elohim is used to refer to angels and angels speaking for God. And here are just two examples out of the Bible where angels speak for God and speak with authority, and using his words, right? And here in Psalm 81, God, Elohim, stands in the divine assembly. He administers judgment in the midst of the gods, Elohim. So we have Elohim here, singular, that he stands in the divine assembly. So the verb is singular here. We can take this as the Most High God, but that he administers judgment in the midst of gods, plural, Elohim. So the angels. So we have Elohim administers judgment in the midst of Elohim. And so this is a good example in Psalm 81, how this word is used in multiple ways. And then here in Psalm 8:5, we have, and it's also quoted in Hebrews 2, for you have made him, and that him is referring to like mankind, Adam, sons of Adam. For you have made him a little lower than angels, Elohim, right? You have made him a little lower than Elohim. So here's another example of Elohim being used for the word God. So just because Jacob says, I have seen God face to face, he could be saying, I've seen as much of God as I can. He could be referring to the Most High God, but what he saw was God's messenger, God's angel. But he could also just be referring to, I have seen God face to face, meaning Elohim, this angel, and named the space after an angel that he saw. The reason I wanted to kind of slow down and touch on this week is because when you start realizing how important a role angels actually play in God's story in the Bible, and some of these extra biblical books that were kind of purposely kept out of the Bible really magnify that and help explain why all of a sudden in the New Testament Jesus comes on the scene and we're hearing about demons, right? Jesus is casting demons out. People believe that other people are inhabited by demons. Like these spiritual entities didn't come out of nowhere. And there's some backstory here. There's some other things going on that maybe didn't make it into the smallest canon, right, that we've ever had, our Western American 66 book Protestant canon. So to just think, when you see the angel of the Lord, that phrase in the Bible, when you see angels showing up, to not just, I don't want to use the word wish them away, but not assume this is like some pre-incarnate Jesus or Yeshua coming on the scene. There is a whole kind, like we are humankind, there is animal kind, there are angelic kind, a kind of entity that God created that really have a significant role. So we need to remember that. And here is just another example of angels speaking for God. In Galatians, why then the law? It was added because of transgressions until the offspring would come to whom the promise had been made, and it was ordained through angels by a mediator. So we could talk about this verse for a really long time about what Paul means here, about why the law was added for transgressions. We'll save that for another time, but the law was given to the people through a mediator, Moses, but through angels. It wasn't God on that mountain, not in his fullness. It was angels. And in Hebrews 2:2, for if the word was spoken through angels, I think I said that wrong. For if the word spoken through angels proved unalterable, and every violation and act of disobedience received a just punishment. There's more to that verse, but the point of this was, for if the word spoken through angels proved unalterable, right? We're going to go through the rest of Hebrews too, so I didn't want to go too far into that right now, but just that sentence, the word was spoken through angels. All right, they're all through the text. And then I just wanted to point out this one other chapter in Deuteronomy. So people might not be aware that the current Old Testament that we have is mostly based on what is called the Masoretic text. And this was a Hebrew version of the text that was written, I don't have the dates in front of me, but it was after Jesus, a few hundred AD is when this was pulled together. Because what was being used in Jesus's time was actually a Greek version called the Septuagint. The very first, there wasn't a cohesive original of the Hebrew text in wide circulation. There was pieces and parts and books, and certainly there are Hebrew texts that date back farther than the Masoretic text. But what was being in use, what Jesus quoted from, what apostles quoted from, what was being read by the first century believers was the Septuagint, right? So it was in Greek. So there are some differences between the Septuagint and the Masoretic text. And some of those differences involve kind of pulling out references to angels. So I'm in the midst of trying to do a study to find the comprehensive differences between the two texts. But this is one that just in preparing for this video, I stumbled upon. And there's a difference here in Deuteronomy 32, starting in verse 8. When the Most High gave the nations their inheritance, when he divided the sons of man, he set boundaries of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God. The LLX means the Septuagint. It just means 70 because there was like 70 scribes, 72 scribes. So LLX just is 70, Septuagint. So according to the number of the sons of God, but the Septuagint says angels of God. But the Lord's portion, his people, Jacob, his allotted inheritance. Rejoice, O heavens. So going down into this chapter, this verse here in 43 is just taken out in many versions of the Bible, but it is in the Septuagint, that text that the first century Christians were reading, the text that Jesus would have even been using. Rejoice, O heavens, with him, and let all God's angels worship him. So here's a reference to angels that does not show up in the Masoretic text. Rejoice, O nations, with his people, for he will avenge the blood of his children. He will take vengeance on his adversaries and repay those who hate him. He will cleanse his land and his people. So does it have a huge theological impact, this difference between the Septuagint and the Masoretic text? I don't know. Not always, but there are some big theological differences, and it would be interesting to look into and really pull out all the differences. I know of some off the top of my head. I guess we'll save that for another video. But here in the first section here where it says sons of God, when you see sons of God in other, the Masoretic and the English versions that come from that, don't say this is angels, but in Job, the phrase sons of God clearly refers to angels coming before a throne, the throne of God. And in Genesis, when it's the sons of God went into the daughters of men, it's clearly this other, and backed up in the book of Jubilees and Enoch, this sons of God who got together with the daughters of men. It was the angelic, this group of beings. So what I'm saying is there are angels all throughout the text of the Bible, and to just, when you're reading, see the theme. They are the ministers. They are ministering in heaven. There's like this priestly order of angels. And as I've been studying through the priesthood in Genesis, what is really showing up and jumping out is that there is this order of priesthood that is going on in heaven, that these angels are really responsible for ministering. And so let's not read over them. Let's not assume that every time they show up, they must be Jesus, because he had an ordained time to come into the world. And if you don't know anything about this theology, that many of these like angels of God were pre-incarnate manifestations of Jesus, then you could probably skip all of this part of this video. But if that's something that you kind of grew up learning, or if that's your understanding, talk to me about it. Tell me about what you have been taught these verses mean. Who wrestled with Jacob is really the question, right? Who wrestled with Jacob that he said, I have seen the face of God? If you have different thoughts about it, that it wasn't an angel, put it in the comments. Let's talk. The last thing on this subject I want to say, if I do get to a helpful Hebrew video this week, this will be in it. The word panim, it means face, but it is also a very versatile word. It can mean like in front of, before. It's used for a few different prepositions. Interestingly, in the book of First Enoch, there is an angel called a Peniel or a Phaniel, really with the meaning, he's one of the four named angels. I'm not going to remember the others: Gabriel, Raphael, Peniel, and there's one more. And so was this that angel? I don't know, but I just thought that was interesting. There's a named angel in the book of Enoch whose name means the face of God. Could this have been him? Perhaps. Okay, let's get back into the text because we're only one chapter in. And Jacob lifted up his eyes and looked. We're in Genesis 33. He lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, Esau was coming, and 400 men with him. So he divided the children among Leah and Rachel and the two female servants, and he put the servants with their children in front, then Leah with her children, and Rachel with Joseph last of all. This lineup is kind of tough, but we do want to remember he loves Rachel, but Joseph's also like an infant, so I don't know. He himself went on before them, bowing himself to the ground 7 times until he came near to his brother. But Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. And when Esau lifted his eyes and saw the women and children, he said, "Who are these with you?" Jacob said, "The children whom God has graciously given your servant." Then the servants drew near, they and their children, and bowed down. And Leah likewise and her children drew near and bowed down. And last, Joseph and Rachel drew near and they bowed down. Esau said, "What do you mean by all this company?" Camp is actually the word in Hebrew. "That I met." And Jacob answered, "To find favor in the sight of my Lord." But Esau said, "I have enough, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself." Jacob said, "No, please, if I have found favor in your sight, then accept my present from my hand. For I have seen your face, which is like seeing the face of God, and you have accepted me." So there's this theme all throughout 32 and 33 of the face. And the face is the presence. It is favor even. It's when you have your face pointing towards someone, you're giving your favor, your blessing, your attention, right? So the face in Hebrew has the literal meaning of literally just your face, but it has a lot of other meanings as well. Like the face of the person is like who they are, their essence. So we see that theme here. Okay, verse 11, "Please accept my blessing that is brought to you, because God has dealt graciously with me, and because I have enough." Thus he urged him, and he took it. Then Esau said, "Let us journey on our way, and I will go ahead of you." But Jacob said to him, "My Lord knows that the children are frail, and that the nursing flocks and herds are a care to me. If they are driven hard for one day, all the flocks will die. Let my Lord pass on ahead of his servant, and I will lead on slowly, at the pace of the livestock that are ahead of me, and at the pace of the children, until I come to my Lord in Seir." So Esau said, "Let me leave with you some of my people who are with me." But he said, "What need is there? Let me find favor in the sight of my Lord." So Esau returned that day and went on his way to Seir. But Jacob journeyed to Sukkot and built himself a house and made booths for his livestock. Therefore, he named the name of this place is called Sukkot. Um, and Jacob came safely to the city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, on his way from Padan Aram. He camped before the city, and from the sons of Hamor, Shechem's father, he bought for 100 pieces of money the piece of land which he had pitched his tent. There he erected an altar and called it El Elohi Israel. So God, the God of Israel. It was a big deal meeting Esau again after all of this time. It was this kind of exchange of, well, let me stay and hang out with you. And Jacob was like, no, this is enough. It was a good meeting. And it seemed to go well, but there did still seem to be like, Jacob was like, no, you don't need to stay with me. You don't need to leave your men with me. I'm good. We've met. Let's now go our separate ways, which was probably wise. But this isn't it, right? As we see, if you fast forward in the word, we see Edom come up many times, and Edom is Esau, the word for red, Edom, the red stew. It comes up a lot. You can do a word search in the whole Old Testament. You'll see where this strife between these two brothers, between their descendants, really continued. We don't get it here in Genesis because it actually comes up, the detail of what happened between them, why this meeting, this peace, the sign of peace, didn't last. It's detailed for us in the book of Jubilee. So we're not going to read from the text of Jubilees on this subject here because there's so much to get through this week, but I highly recommend you read the whole section, and we'll go over at the end exactly what chapters kind of coincide with this section of Genesis. But Esau's sons get wind of what's going on here and are angry, and really a war begins to break out between Esau's sons and Jacob's sons. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit, but this peaceful reunion is not where it's left. So it's really sad because it seems to really be the undercurrent to strife, violence, sadness that continues all throughout history. But we are in Genesis 34. Now, Dinah, and I know a lot of your versions say Dinah, but the Hebrew is Dinah. Now, Dinah, the daughter of Leah, whom she had borne to Jacob, went out to see the women of the land. She was looking to make friends. And when Shechem, the son of Hamor, the Hivite, the prince of the land, saw her, he seized her and lay with her and humiliated her. His soul was drawn to Dinah, the daughter of Jacob. He loved the young woman and spoke tenderly to her. So Shechem spoke to his father Hamor, saying, "Get me this girl for my wife." Now Jacob heard that he had defiled his daughter Dinah, but his sons were with his livestock in the field. So Jacob held his peace until they came, and Hamor, the father of Shechem, went out to Jacob to speak with him. The sons of Jacob had come in from the field as soon as they had heard of it, and the men were indignant and very angry because he had done an outrageous thing in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter. For such a thing must not be done. But Hamor spoke with them, saying, "The soul of my son Shechem longs for your daughter. Please give her to him to be his wife. Make marriages with us. Give your daughters to us, and take our daughters for yourselves. You shall dwell with us, and the land shall be open to you. Dwell and trade in it, and get property in it," which Jacob already bought property. Shechem also said to her father and to her brothers, "Let me find favor in your eyes, and whatever you say to me, I will give. Ask me for as great a bride price and gift as you will, and I will give you whatever you say to me. Only give me the young woman to be my wife." So the son, who the city is apparently named after, unless it's named after like a father or grandfather, but the city of Shechem, the son's name is Shechem. He took Dinah and There is a debate about whether or not uh, Dinah was like seduced or was she raped. Um, be careful of the words we use on YouTube, but was she taken against her will? Was she seduced? Jubilees actually sorts it all out for us because we'll get some details in a moment. So in verse 13, the sons of Jacob answered Shechem and his father Hamor deceitfully because he had defiled their sister. Here we have Dinah, but it's Dinah. They said to him, "We cannot do this thing to give our sister to one who is uncircumcised, for that would be a disgrace to us. Only on this condition we will agree with you, that you will become as we are by every male among you being circumcised. Then we will give our daughters to you, and we will take your daughters to ourselves, and we will dwell with you and become one people." This doesn't sound like what God wants, right? Um, but if you will not listen to us and be circumcised, then we will take our daughter and we will be gone. Remember, these are the brothers calling Dinah their daughter. She's young, and one of the texts says she's the twin of Zebulun. Their words pleased Hamor and Hamor's son Shechem, and the young man did not delay to do the thing because he delighted in Jacob's daughter. Now he was the most honored of all his father's house. So Hamor and his son Shechem came to the gate of their city and spoke to the men of the city, saying, "These men are at peace with us. Let them dwell in the land and trade in it. For behold, the land is large enough for them. Let us take their daughters as wives, and let us give them our daughters. Only on this condition will the men agree to dwell with us and to become one people, when every male among us is circumcised, as they are circumcised. Will not their livestock, their property, and all their beasts be ours? Only let us agree with them, and they will dwell with us." And all who went out of the gate of his city listened to Hamor and his son Shechem, and every male was circumcised, all who went out of the gate of his city. On the third day, when they were sore, two of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, took their swords and came out against the city while it felt secure and killed all the males. They killed Hamor and his son Shechem with the sword and took Dinah out of Shechem's house and went away. So she was there with him all this time. The sons of Jacob came upon the slain and plundered the city because they had defiled their sister. They took their flocks and their herds and their donkeys and whatever was in the city and in the field, and all their wealth, all their little ones and their wives, all that were in their houses, they captured and plundered. Then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, you have brought trouble on me by making me stink to the inhabitants of this land, the Canaanites and the Perizzites. My numbers are few, and if they gather themselves against me and attack me, I shall be destroyed, both I and my household. But they said, "Should he treat our sister like a prostitute?" So the brothers apparently were taking a stand against what has happened to their sister, much more strong of a stand than Jacob. And if you only read Genesis, you don't get a little bit more insight. It sounds like they maybe were too harsh. It sounds like, without some of the backstory, we don't see just exactly how righteous these brothers were. And they were called so by God in the book of Jubilees. So I find that to be really fascinating to give us a different coloring of what happened here. So we're going to look at Jubilees here with some backstory on what happened to Dinah. Okay, Jubilees 30. In the first year of the 6th week, he went up to Salem, to the east of Shechem, in the 4th month, and he went in peace. Shechem, the son of Hamor the Hivite, the prince of the land, carried off Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, into the house, and he had her and defiled her. She was a little girl, a child of 12 years. Just need to be careful with the words that we say. We don't want to trip the algorithms on YouTube. So he begged his father and her brothers that she might be given to him as a wife. Jacob and his sons were very angry because of the men of Shechem, for they had defiled Dinah, their sister, and spoke to them while planning evil acts, and they dealt deceitfully with them and tricked them. Simeon and Levi came unexpectedly to Shechem and executed judgment on all the men of Shechem and killed all the men whom they found in it. They did not leave a single one remaining. They killed all in hand-to-hand battle because they had dishonored their sister Dinah. Let it not again be done from now on that a daughter of Israel be defiled. Judgment is ordained in heaven against them, that they should destroy all the men of the Shechemites with the sword, because they have committed shame in Israel. Yah delivered them into the hands of the sons of Jacob, that they might exterminate them with the sword and execute judgment on them, that it might not again be done in Israel, that a virgin of Israel should be defiled. Jumping down to verse 17, for this reason I commanded you, saying, give this testimony to Israel, to see how the Shechemites and their sons fared, see how they were delivered into the hands of the two sons of Jacob, and they killed them under torture. It was counted to them for righteousness, and it was written down to them for righteousness. The offspring of Levi were chosen for the priesthood and to be Levites, that they might minister before Yah as we do. Remember, angels are speaking here, because angels are giving this message to Moses, so that the Levites would minister before Yah as we do continually. Levi and his sons will be blessed forever, for he was zealous to execute righteousness and judgment and vengeance on all those who arose against Israel. So they wrote a testimony in his favor of blessing and righteousness on the heavenly tablets in the presence of Elohim of all. We remember the righteousness that the man fulfilled during his life throughout the years until 1,000 generations. They will record it. It will come to him and to his descendants after him. And he has been recorded on the heavenly tablets as a friend and a righteous man. Verse 23, on the day when the sons of Jacob killed Shechem, it was written in the record in their favor in heaven that they had executed righteousness and uprightness and vengeance on the sinners, and it was written for a blessing. They brought Dinah, their sister, out of the house of Shechem. They took everything that was in Shechem captive. They took their sheep and their oxen and their donkeys and all their wealth and all their flocks, and they brought them all to Jacob, their father. So this is my little artistic rendition of the brothers. Really, it was led by the two brothers, but I'm sure some others were involved as well. And I just wanted to remind us all that Dinah was in their house. They took her, they kept her. And if Jubilees is correct, she was 12. She was, even for the time here where women were married off young, 12 was too young. So their little sister, they rose up to take her back. And the angels are telling Moses that Levi was righteous here. He was gifted the priesthood moving forward in his line because of his righteousness. So sometimes we get this idea that Simeon and Levi went off and were like rogue and really took matters into their own hands, and they shouldn't have. But if you look into Jubilees, it really does give a whole different twist to this picture. And it gives a different idea to the priesthood as well. And that's really what I want to sort out here. We'll talk about that more as we go, but there's this negative connotation of the priesthood that winds up being established, the Levitical priesthood under Aaron. We have this negative connotation. I know I did. And I always wondered, was this like penance that Levi had to do for leading this raid, all this bloody raid? But according to Jubilees, this was not unjust. They took a minor and had their way with her and basically kidnapped her and kept her. Yeah. Okay, so we're picking up here in Jubilees 31. And just a reminder, Isaac and Rebecca are still alive. And here, I think sometimes we forget I do anyway, forget that even though Isaac was older and had lost his vision, and this whole thing that went on between Jacob and Esau, um, and the blessing and all of that, it really seemed like Isaac was very old because he couldn't see well and he was kind of tricked. But he must have had some kind of vision issue because he lived for at least 20 more years. And so we pick up here as Jacob's coming back to see Isaac. So in Jubilees 31, verse 8, Jacob went in to Isaac, his father, to the room where he lay, and his two sons were with him. He took his father's hand, stooped down, and he kissed him. Isaac held on to the neck of Jacob, his son, and he wept on his neck. The darkness left his eyes, the eyes of Isaac, and he saw the two sons of Jacob, Levi and Judah. And he said, "Are these your sons, my son? Because they look like you." He said to Isaac, "They were truly my sons, and you have clearly seen that they are truly my sons." They came near to him and he turned and kissed them and embraced them together. The spirit of prophecy came down into his mouth, and he took Levi by his right hand and Judah by his left. He turned to Levi first and began to bless him and said to him, "May the Elohim of all, the very master of all the ages, bless you and your children throughout the ages. May Yah give to you and your offspring greatness and great glory from all flesh. May Yah cause you and your offspring to draw near to him, to serve him in his sanctuary, like the messengers of the presence of Yah, and as the pure ones." So like the angels, right? "The offspring of your sons shall be for the glory and the greatness and purity of Elohim. May he make them great throughout all the ages. They shall be judges and princes and chiefs of all offspring of the sons of Jacob. They shall speak the word of Yah in righteousness, and they shall judge all his judgments in righteousness. They shall declare my ways to Jacob and my paths to Israel. The blessings of Yah shall be given in their mouths to bless all the offspring of the beloved. Your mother has called your name Levi, and rightly she has called your name. You will be joined to Yah, or Yehovah, and be the companion of all the sons of Jacob. Let his table be your table, and let your sons eat from it. May your table be full throughout all generations, and let your food not fail in all the ages. Let all who hate you fall down before you, and let all your adversaries be rooted out and perish. Blessed be he that blesses you, and cursed be every nation that curses you." And to Judah he said, "May Yah give you strength and power to put all that hate you under your feet. You and one of your sons will be a prince over the sons of Jacob. May your name and the name of your sons go out across every land and region. Then shall the Gentiles fear you, and all the nations of the people shall shake with fear of you. In you will be the help of Jacob, and in you will be found the salvation of Israel. When you sit on the throne which honors of your righteousness, there shall be great peace for all the offspring of the sons of the beloved. Blessed be he that blesses you, and cursed be all that hate you, afflict you, or curse you. They shall be rooted out and destroyed from the earth. I mean, here's this text written, at least the oldest copies we have are written a few hundred years before Jesus is born. We believe that they're just the oldest copies, right? Because older copies were written that had disintegrated or whatever. But this was written clearly. The latest date possible was a few hundred years before Yeshua, Jesus, was born. And here we have, "And in you will be the salvation of Israel, and in you will be the Yeshua of Israel." I love it. It gives me goosebumps. And then chapter 32, just the first verse here. "That night he stayed in Bethel, and Levi dreamed that they had ordained and made his sons and him priests of the Most High Elohim forever. And he woke from his sleep and blessed Yah." So here we have Levi and Judah just given this blessing from Isaac. And we see them come true, right? Like, so Levi, the Levitical priesthood was handed to Levi here. He was going to be the one who drew near to the presence of God. Did you see that language about feasting with God? That the table would always be full, right? These are all positive, good connotations of the priesthood and the sacrifices, right? Sacrifices were like meals with the Lord, and that Levi's table would always be full, and he would be having this communion meals with the Father. And then we have Judah, who is pronounced that he and his descendants would rule over Israel. It really just fills in some pieces of a beautiful puzzle from the book of Genesis. And so I just, again, encourage you all, if you haven't read the book of Jubilees, like, I'm not saying it's scripture, right? I'm not making that pronouncement over it. I'm saying I don't see why it's not. And the more I read it, the more I wonder if when the canon was being put together, that it was left out for not good reasons, maybe more like self-serving reasons for the people who are putting together the canon. So lots of wonderful nuggets in there. So I highly recommend. Okay, Genesis 35. We still have a ways to go here, so thanks for sticking with me. 35 verse 1. And God said to Jacob, arise and go to Bethel and dwell there. Make an altar there to the God who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau. So Jacob said to his household and to all who were with him, put away the foreign gods that are among you and purify yourselves and change your garments. Then let us arise and go up to Bethel, so that I may make an altar there to the God who answers me in the day of my distress and has been with me wherever I have gone. So they gave to Jacob all the foreign gods they had, the rings that were in their ears, and Jacob hid them under the terebinth tree that was near Shechem. And as they journeyed, a terror from God fell upon the cities that were around them, so that they did not pursue the sons of Jacob. And Jacob came to Luz, that is Bethel, which is in the land of Canaan, and he and all the people who were with him. And there he built an altar, and he called the place El Bethel, because there God had revealed himself to him when he fled his brother. And Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died, and she was buried under an oak below Bethel. So he called its name Alon Bakuth, which means oak of weeping. In verse 9, God appeared to Jacob again when he came from Padan Aram and blessed him. And God said to him, your name is Jacob. No longer shall your name be called Jacob, but Israel shall be your name. So he called his name Israel. And God said to him, I am El Shaddai, or some versions will say God Almighty, but this is El Shaddai. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall come from you, and kings shall come from your own body. The land that I gave to Abraham and Isaac, I will give to you, and I will give the land to your offsprings after you. Then God went up from him in the place where he had spoken with him, and Jacob set up a pillar in the place where he had spoken with him, a pillar of stone, and he poured out a drink offering on it and poured oil on it. So Jacob called the name of this place where God had spoken with him, Bethel, the house of God, right? Then they journeyed from Bethel. When they were still some distance from Ephrath, Rachel went into labor, and she had hard labor. And when her labor was at its hardest, the midwife said to her, do not fear, for you have another son. And as her soul was departing, for she was dying, she called his name Ben-Oni, which means son of my suffering. But his father called him Benjamin, which means son of my right hand. Verse 19, so Rachel died, and she was buried on the way to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem. And Jacob set up a pillar over her tomb. It is the pillar of Rachel's tomb, which is there to this day. Israel journeyed on and pitched his tent beyond the tower of Eder. While Israel lived in that land, Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard of it. Now the sons of Jacob were 12. The sons of Leah, Reuben, Jacob's firstborn, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. The sons of Rachel, Joseph and Benjamin. The sons of Bilhah, Rachel's servant, Dan and Naphtali. The sons of Zilpah, Leah's servant, Gad and Asher. These were the sons of Jacob who were born to him in Padan Aram. And Jacob came to his father Isaac at Mamre, at Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac had sojourned. Now the days of Isaac were 180 years, and Isaac breathed his last, and he died and was gathered to his people, old and full of days. And his sons Esau and Jacob buried him. So I have an asterisk here, just pointing out that there is a whole lot more said about this story with Reuben and Bilhah. You can see Jubilees 33. He tricked her. It doesn't sound like Bilhah was really at fault. It just makes me think of just how dark it must have been at night, that there just seems to be all this trickery that can go on, and you think you're with someone else and it's not that person. And anyway, she was sleeping and he took advantage of her, and it's clear this is why he was not given this firstborn blessing. He was not going to receive the priesthood. The same way Esau was not going to receive the priesthood from Abraham. Reuben's character was not going to receive, not going to permit him to receive the priesthood from Jacob. And we see already that it's already been given to Levi. So Genesis 36, we are not reading all the way through this chapter because this is long, and the entire chapter 36 is about the generations of Esau and its genealogy, which I highly recommend you read. We should not skip reading the genealogy. It's there for a reason, but we're just going to read this introductory passage. These are the generations of Esau, that is Edom. Esau took his wives from the Canaanites, Adah, the daughter of Elon, the Hittite, Aholibamah, the daughter of Anah, the daughter of Zidian, the Hivite, and Abisamath, Ishmael's daughter, and the sister of Neboeth. And Adah bore to Esau Eliphaz. Basemath bore Reuel, and Oholibamah. This is why I'm not reading the whole chapter. He bore Jeush, Jalam, and Korah. And these are the sons of Esau who were born to him in the land of Canaan. Then Esau took his wives, his sons, his daughters, and all the members of his household, his livestock, all his beasts, and all his property that he had acquired in the land of Canaan. And he went into a land away from his brother Jacob, for their possessions were too great for them to dwell together. The land of their sojournings could not support them because of their livestock. So Esau settled in the hill country of Seir. Esau, that is Edom. So just to kind of wrap up the story of Jacob and Esau, it's sad. It makes me sad because they are brothers. And these are my artistic rendition of Edom, Esau, and his 12 sons, and what winds up happening and it's outlined actually in the book of Jubilees, but not in Genesis, is that once Isaac dies, their sons are angry that Jacob is the one who has the blessings. And so the sons actually rally up and get Esau to really declare war on Jacob's family. And nothing good comes of that, not for them anyway. Jubilees really does outline the whole battle and how Esau winds up dying at the hand of Jacob, but righteously so on Jacob's part because they came after him. After both boys actually had promised Rebekah, their mother, that they would have peace and get along with one another. And then Esau followed his sons into ruin, and they suffered for it and really they were really conquered at that point by Jacob. Anyway, read through the whole narrative in the Book of Jubilees. It's interesting and gives you great backstory. So here's just a map of the area. I think it's helpful to get a visual sometimes of all these cities that are talked of. We can see Edom here in the south, but we can see Shiloh, Bethel, right? I lost my cursor. The city of Shechem, and to just see, here's that river, the brook, the Jabbok River, to just see where some of the stuff was going on, and to just get a visual. And since we are going a little long today, I'm not going to talk about that too in depth, but here's just a review of the chapters that apply from Jubilees to what's going on here in Genesis. So just a quick recap. In Jubilees 31, it talks of Isaac blessing Levi and Judah, right? We talked about that. Jubilees 32 talks about Levi and his dream of the priesthood, where God confirms the name change of Jacob. And Sukkot is actually celebrated here. So it's part of why I wanted to look at the map to show you where Sukkot was. So we have the holiday Sukkot being celebrated in the city named Sukkot. And Jacob actually celebrates the 8th day of Sukkot, and it's called the Day of Addition, because he's celebrating the time where God reaffirms this covenant. So Sukkot really seems to be celebrated throughout the Book of Jubilees in celebration of a covenant with God. And then Jubilees 33 talks all about Reuben and Bilhah, and that the angel gives Moses laws on this, that there will be strict laws on what happens if a son sleeps with his father's wife. Jacob and his 3 sons defeat the 7 kings and make a treaty in Jubilees 34. And this is the time where Joseph is actually taken to Egypt, but they don't go into detail on that until later. Bilhah and Dinah actually die on the same day, or right around, all in the same month, actually, where Joseph is taken. And so then there is this day of remembrance that is called the Day of Atonement. It's the 15th of the 7th month, that there is a day of mourning and atonement for the loss of Bilhah, the loss of Jacob's only daughter, Dinah, and also to lament Joseph, who at this point Jacob believes is dead. I think probably prophetically, this Day of Atonement was instituted in order to have the brothers atone for what they did, if you know the story coming up, but we'll talk about that more when we get there. Okay, in Jubilees 35, Rebecca instructs Jacob and Esau to live in peace, and they promise her that they will, and that's when Rebecca dies. In chapter 36, Isaac instructs Jacob and Esau about the future and gives them prophetic knowledge and directions. And Leah, who Jacob now loves, the Jubilee specifically says that Jacob loves Leah after Rachel dies, that they really, it seems like, have finally Leah gets the love that she was looking for, and Jacob loved her. But she dies there in chapter 36. In 37, Esau's sons want revenge on Jacob for taking the blessing. And Esau joins them in the war. And then Jubilees 38, Jacob and his sons defeat Edom, and Jacob kills Esau. Edom now pays tribute to Jacob. So that brings us to Malachi 2 for our prophet pairing. Again, there are so many choices that I have to just whittle down. I wanted to go over Obadiah 1 because it really fits here. And the time I tried to do that on a previous video, I don't know, I was having technical difficulties apparently, because I wound up having to cut it out. But on your own, read Obadiah, the book of Obadiah, which is just 1 chapter, to really see some of the impact, the fallout of the relationship breakdown between the sons of Jacob and the sons of Esau, because it's all over. You can do a word search and look for the word Edom, and just see how these 2 brothers and their sons just never recovered. And it's pretty ugly, what happens. But I settled on a pairing from Malachi 2 because of just the content and how it speaks directly to the priesthood and to Judah. So Malachi 2, verse 1. And now, O priests, this command is for you. If you will not listen, if you will not take it to heart to give honor to my name, says the Lord of hosts, then I will send the curse upon you and I will curse your blessings. Indeed, I have already cursed them because you do not lay it to heart. Behold, I will rebuke your offspring and spread dung on your faces, the dung of your offerings, and you shall be taken away with it, so that you shall know that I have sent this command to you, that my covenant with Levi may stand, says the Lord of hosts. My covenant with him was one of life and peace, and I gave them to him. It was a covenant of fear, and he feared me. He stood in awe of my name. The true instruction was in his mouth, and no wrong was found in his lips. He walked with me in peace and uprightness, and he turned many from iniquity. For the lips of a priest should guard knowledge, and people should seek instruction from his mouth, for he is the messenger of the Lord of hosts. But you have turned aside from the way. You have caused many to stumble by your instruction, and you have corrupted the covenant of Levi, says the Lord of hosts. And so I make you despised and abased before all the people, inasmuch as you do not keep my ways, but show partiality in your instruction. So I don't know where else we even see a covenant with Levi. We see a covenant with Aaron, who's of the tribe of Levi, but I don't see a covenant with Levi anywhere else explicitly given to us, that it was between God and Levi specifically, here and then in the book of Jubilees. So it sounds like Malachi is referencing Jubilees here. Okay, verse 10, have we not all one Father? Has not one God created us? Why then are we faithless to one another, profaning the covenant of our fathers? Judah has been faithless, and an abomination has been committed in Israel and Jerusalem. For Judah has profaned the sanctuary of the Lord, which he loves, and has married the daughter of a foreign god. May the Lord cut off from the tents of Jacob any descendant of the man who does this, who brings an offering to the Lord of hosts. And this second thing you do, you cover the Lord's altar with tears, with weeping and groaning, because he no longer regards the offerings, or accepts it with favor from your hand. But you say, why does he not? Because the Lord was a witness between you and the wife of your youth, to whom you have been faithless. She is your companion and your wife by covenant. Did he not make them one with a portion of the Spirit in their union? And what was the one God seeking? Godly offspring. So guard yourselves in spirit, and let none of you be faithless to the wife of your youth. For the man who does not love his wife but divorces her, says the Lord, the God of Israel, covers his garment with violence, says the Lord of hosts. So guard yourselves in your spirit and do not be faithless. So referencing Judah and his choice of wives, right? So there's a whole story there we'll get to in the coming weeks. But Judah as the person who did take a wife that he shouldn't have originally, but it's also Judah as the nation, and that they are being faithless to the wife of their youth, right? The covenant with the Lord. And so just again, just a reminder of this covenant that was set in place from Isaac to the sons of Jacob, and that they were ordained this. And I find it fascinating that Jubilees covers some of this information and Genesis does not. So to bring this whole teaching to a close, we are going to look at Hebrews 2, and it just talks about we have some more references to angels and priests and who Yeshua is, and the whole book of Hebrews can be read with such clarity when there can be some understanding of the roles of angels in the Bible. and also the priesthood that did not start with Aaron, um, but went all the way back to Adam in the order of Melchizedek, right? So when we have those two ideas in mind, I think Hebrews is much easier to read, but we're just going to take Hebrews 2 for today. Okay, so Hebrews 2. Therefore, we must pay much closer attention to what we have heard, lest we drift away from it. For since the message declared by angels proved to be reliable, and every transgression or disobedience received is just a retribution, how shall we escape if we neglect such a great salvation? It was declared at first by the Lord, and it was attested to us by those who heard, while God also bore witness by signs and wonders and various miracles, and by gifts of the Holy Spirit distributed according to his will. For it was not to angels that God subjugated the world to come, of which we are speaking. It has been testified somewhere, that somewhere is Psalm 8. What is man that you are mindful of him, or the Son of Man that you care for him? You made him for a little while lower than the angels. You have crowned him with glory and honor, putting everything in subjugation under his feet. Now, in putting everything in subjugation to him, he left nothing outside of his control. At present, we do not yet see everything in subjection to him, but we see him for a little while was made lower than the angels, namely Jesus, crowned with glory and honor because of the suffering of death, so that by the grace of God, he might taste death for everyone. Verse 10, for it was fitting that he, for whom and by whom all things exist, in bringing many sons to glory, should make the founder of their salvation perfect through suffering. For he who sanctifies and those who are sanctified all have one source. That is why he is not ashamed to call them brothers, saying, I will tell of your name to my brothers. In the midst of the congregation, I will sing your praise. And again, I will put my trust in him. And again, behold, I and the children God has given me. Since therefore the children share in flesh and blood, he himself likewise partook of the same things, that through death he might destroy the one who has the power of death, that is the devil, and deliver all those who, through fear of death, were subject to lifelong slavery. For surely it is not angels that he helps, but he helps the offspring of Abraham. Therefore, he had to be made like his brothers in every respect, so that he might become a merciful and faithful high priest in the service of God, to make propitiation for the sins of the people. For because he himself has suffered when tempted, he is able to help those who are being tempted. So, Hebrews, the whole Bible, the themes that we see right from the beginning is God, a priesthood, mediators between the rest of humanity, righteous mediators between the rest of humanity and God. We see the coming salvation, the resurrection, right? That's, if you can read, especially Paul with that idea, like that salvation we find in Yeshua and Jesus, whose name means, yet Yeshua means salvation, right? The salvation we find is this future resurrection, right? We are saved from the second death. So if you think of this priesthood that happens from the beginning, the salvation, the saving from the second death and the resurrection, this angelic ministry, these ministers that are there, but who will we be, right? We are for a little while made less than angels, but at the resurrection, we will be called to higher, and we will actually be the judge of angels, right? So if we think of the story is being told and unfolded all the way from the beginning, and it really does make the Bible easier to read, easier to understand when we know some of these themes and we don't read past them. We don't read into the text what we want the text to say. So that was the last slide. So I just wanted to end with just a word on reading the word. I have learned so much in reading the word of God line by line over and over again. I've learned so much by teaching my children, right? Needing to be at a place where I could coherently teach them what the Word of God said, where we could study together, but also they had questions. So in these questions, I had to come up with answers, right? And just that's what drove me to study. It was really that my kids wanted to know, and I wanted to have good answers for them. But studying the Word is a lifelong thing, right? We don't have all the answers ever. But what I want to encourage you is when you're reading it line by line, to not take presuppositions into it, to not take assumptions into the reading. Oh, that this must be an appearance of Jesus. Well, what does the text say? Right? The text says, messenger of God, Elohim, messenger of Elohim, angel of God, right? So let's not assume what that is. Let's not assume that Levi did something unrighteous, right? Because he went and made judgment on the whole city of Shechem, right? We get these ideas. At least these were my ideas. And so what I have learned and am learning to do is set those ideas aside and see what the Word is telling us. And even without jubilees, we have confirmation in Malachi that Levi was righteous. He was righteous, and he was given the priesthood because of his righteousness. So let me know what you think. If you do dig into the Book of Jubilees, I'd love to discuss it. And I'd love to answer any questions or talk to you about a disagreement, whatever it might be. Like this, comment. You can even dislike it. Any interaction with the video is actually good, and YouTube likes that, and it helps this be seen by more and more people. So if you would share this video with people who might find it valuable, it's so much appreciated. And I hope you have a fabulous rest of your Sabbath, and keep an eye out for a helpful Hebrew video. I haven't done one in a couple weeks, so we'll do that. And as I'm finishing up preparing for the priesthood in Genesis, I don't have a title for it yet. Fascinating things in there. So, all right. Have a wonderful day. See you next time.